the new voice actor of Zavala of Keith David, which is very cool. He's a very iconic voice. Was he in Mass Effect?
He's been in a bunch of things. So he was Anderson in I wanted to say captain at first because he just started as captain, but eventually he gains ranks as he goes on throughout the entire thing. But yeah, Anderson in Mass Effect, and for Bungie fans in particular, the most notable voice talent work that he's done is actually from Halo as the Arbiter, which is a beloved character.
Right.
And I think, to touch on this really briefly, there was never going to be a perfect replacement for Lance, because there was always, he's been with us for 9 years doing this, and it all happened so suddenly. It would, my first reaction when I saw the news was, is this some kind of terrible joke? Like, surely I'm being punked, right?
Hoping it was fake.
There's never going to be a perfect replacement, but as far as replacements for Lance Reddick go, I think this is the most appropriate. It's a seasoned voice actor. It's someone who's known to the community, someone who I think can respect the source material because they have the talent and they have the experience within the industry. It's another gentleman of color, which I think is important to the role, and more importantly than anything else, I think that it pays homage to Lance in terms of just the skill required to take on the depth that he created for Zavala. He is someone who has defined the role as much as any of the writers have, because without his delivery, we wouldn't get the kind of... How do I best put this? Zavala is that person who has maybe 3 tones of voice, and yet within each one of them, you can convey dozens of different emotions now that we've known him for 9 years, We barely ever see him get animated and angry. We barely ever see him in this kind of somber tone. We've only seen that in the last few years because we've only really gotten to know him at that depth in that recent time. And Lance being able to deliver all of that within the timbre of just his voice for Zavala, which is a more limited range than what he could do for anything, because Lance has done dozens of other voice roles prior to that. It just shows the incredible talent that was on display there. And if there was ever someone to follow in those footsteps and to really show some appreciation for the role, I think that, Keith David is probably the best choice for it.
Very good selection.
And, like I said, there will never be a perfect choice. And I think everyone is painfully aware of that, but this is the best choice they can make in an impossible situation. So, and the good thing as well is that the community has, widely speaking, had nothing but positivity towards Keith jumping into the role. Everyone has... I remember when it was announced, Welcome Commander was the thing that was rolling around all over Twitter. And, it shows that there's a great deal of love for the character, but also it shows there's a great deal of fondness for both of the people who are involved, both Lance and Keith. And frankly, I don't know, it's always a very sad topic to bring up, and I'm left a little bit without words for it, but I'm glad that Keith David is here for this, I suppose is the best way to put it.
Yeah, it's bittersweet, but it's definitely not a celebration because obviously the circumstances. But I remember, we were talking about how it would be very just difficult to get someone else to do the lines. And they obviously, the most important thing is that they're not just doing an impression of Lance. It's not even Zavala because it's Lance's voice, and Lance has had a very unique voice, but it definitely wouldn't, it shouldn't have been someone just doing an impression trying to sound like how Lance used to sound. It would have to be its own separate thing, but also something that fits Zavala, and they managed to do, they managed to find someone who definitely will be a very good fit, a very powerful, deep voice that I think is gonna make a lot of sense. So, it's obviously not good news, but it's at least a very good choice. I think I think they'll do it pretty well.
And if I may, this is not at all the same instance because this is over contract things, but when it comes to the change in the voice actors behind voice talent, I should say, behind Ikora in particular, the switch over in talent there, I think it's something that Bungie was able to handle and land somewhat well before there. In both instances, whilst it is clearly 2 different voices, I still read it in both senses as Ikora. The spirit and the tone of the character remains. And I think that, if anything else, it shows that the voice direction, I suppose is the way you put it, for Bungie, is probably going to be able to land that, especially with Keith on the delivery. You know, I think that they will capture the essence of who Zavala is still. Yeah, I I wish I could say something resoundingly positive at the end. I guess the only thing I can say is, Keith, we're so glad you're here. We wish that it had never needed to happen and that the conversation wasn't there, but we're glad you're here, you know? And from everybody, I guess, good luck, right?
Yeah. Then you've got the what is it? The reunion of all the original Vanguard, and even Akora's obviously got the new voice actress, and obviously Nathan Fillion, who's fully coming back as voicing his original lines for Cade 6, who I guess will be kind of character in probably the campaign. Maybe it'll be a vendor for the location, but yeah, it'll be cool to see the 3 Vanguard, although obviously a lot has changed. Cade's come and gone, and then Akora's got a new voice actress, and Zavala too. But yeah,
you know, from Gina Torres to Mara, I want to say it's Mara Juno. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Mara. I'm so sorry if I'm not. And you know, from at one point Nathan Fillion to Nolan North, and back to Nathan Fillion now, and then from Lance Reddick to Keith David. You know, all the Vanguard has gone through an evolution over 10 years, as I think is somewhat inevitable, but. To be completely honest about it as well, it's just this is a part of Destiny's story now, as much as no one is going to immediately be happy to hear it. And I think that the only thing that is good about this is that it's all been handled with grace.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. What did you make of